you don't need more exercises. You need fewer, but done with more precision. Because as we will discover in this video, there are 6 mobility or movement patterns / positions that address most common restrictions of our joints while respecting our physiological's natural preference to utilize as many areas of the body when we are moving or orientating in relation to space. So in this video, we're going to cover what those positions are, why we want to improve on these before doing any other exercises, and also how to perform them so that you can immediately start integrating them in your fitness routine. Now, who am I? I'm Tim, and I help men who are fed up with having physical issues they've developed by more traditional forms of fitness and health so they can build an athletic, lean, and pain-free body in less than 1.5 hours a week. And we do that by being very precise with how we signal change over 2 physical capacities that are fundamental to how we move. And we supply it with the necessary building blocks for recovery and healing to take place so that we can actually enjoy this athletic body that we've built for the decades to come. Now, the reason why we want to reduce the amount of mobility exercise and swap them for 6 patterns or positions is because we as humans and also other species have evolved to utilize more areas all at once to be maximally efficient with how we're spending energy and orientating ourselves in relation to the environment we are in. So if you sit, if you squat, if you hinge, if you walk, or if you even swing, brachiate, running, sprinting, like all of these movement patterns are combinations of our physiology that has evolved through the years to be more efficient with how we're recruiting areas, tissues all at once, creating these synergies so that we are efficient with how we're spending energy, right? Because if not, or through evolution, the species that were most efficient with the resources, those are the ones who could survive and be on top of the pyramids, so to say. The most mobile joints that we have, which are proximally located, meaning they are centrally located to the body, are shoulders, the spine, and the hips. And each of these joints have 3 degrees of freedom or 3 ranges of motion, right? The shoulders, the spine, and the hips, they can all flex and extend, so move forwards and backwards. They can all move from side to side, or side bend in case of the spine. And we can all rotate them in the transverse plane of motion, right? So these joints that are located more centrally have a lot of ranges of motion, meaning that when we are positioning them in a certain way, they also influence the joints that come after. So by prioritizing the ranges of motion of these specific joints, we can already see, or we can already look into positions that can also have a ripple effect on the joints that come after, so that we can be more efficient with how we're addressing our weaknesses and utilize that whole body utilization in its patterning. So this brings me to the other part. Now, what we want to do in order to improve them is we want to first be respectful to the fact that in this case, or for the positions that we're going to cover, we are predominantly working the end range of motion. So we're building, or we're trying to accumulate strength near the end ranges. Now, it's worth mentioning that in this video, we're going to cover the positions that stimulate this end range of motion to make sure that we're decreasing the amount of restrictions that we are experiencing when we are in certain end ranges. However, in order to achieve lifelong pain-free athleticism, it's also very good, or a necessary building block, to build as much relative force as you can over a full range of motion, meaning that you are well equipped to produce high amounts of force for various loads that are coming into the system by contracting both skeletal muscle as your connective tissue in these full ranges. Those combined, so full range strength, skeletal muscle, connective tissue, plus the control, end range control in certain positions, those combined have let you build a very athletic and pain-free base that you can enjoy for the decades to come, so that you are very much in a good position with high amounts of capacity to deal with a lot of loads that could potentially come in. Now, I will link a video towards the 6 patterns that you can integrate that I use as well in order to build this massive amount of relative strength over a full range of motion in the description below. But for this video specifically, we're predominantly focusing on the positions that trigger or stimulate end ranges. Now, how are we going to build that end range strength and control? We do that not through stretching, as you know by now if you follow this channel for a while, because stretching in itself, it's a very potent mechanism, but it's not a remodeling mechanism. It's a mechanism where your brain and the nervous system knows where your joints are in relation to space. And they want to know it because if you are accessing potential ranges which the brain and the nervous system don't control, there is a possibility that you could damage tissues, joints, capsules, which you definitely don't want, because that would mean that you're losing potential movement options that the brain and the nervous system can contract and also can control. So the idea of a stretch is simply your brain and nervous system knows where you are in order for it to either have you contract into a safe range and prevent potential injuries. So what you're doing when you're stretching, you simply go into that end range, you stay there, and then you go out without providing a stimulus that the brain and the nervous system wants in order to know if you have actual control over that range. So what we want to do is we want to add a load or resistance to that stretch so that we're combining this stretching mechanism, but we're also facilitating growth to happen by providing a stimuli. Now, there are 2 approaches which I both tried, and I found that one is better for the other because of one reason. And that reason is that your body only undergoes certain adaptive changes once a certain threshold of a stimuli is met. So once a stimuli hits a certain threshold, which is called mechanotransduction, your cells undergoes changes in order to come back stronger and adaptive, and it does so because it wants to be protective of the resources it expends. Now, the first approach that you can go for in order to facilitate this is by doing weighted stretches. And this is not the one I opt for, even though I've done this for years. And the reason why is because once you're adding a load towards a stretch, you're doing 2 things that are potentially not as effective as the other approach. The first one is that you are adding the stretch over a full range of motion, so you're moving in positions from a starting point all the way to your end ranges, which means that you're accumulating or you're spending more energy over a full range at the point in which you want to facilitate change, right? So if you're moving in this direction, all of this trajectory or these inches of the pattern are not really targeted to change, which is only happening at this part. So that is one objective. Now, it does, of course, help to create more strength over that full range. But if you want to specifically address the end ranges, you're also spending energy on other regions. Now, the second one is by adding the load towards the stretch. What I've noticed is that the more you're getting towards your end ranges, the more your brain and the nervous system go on high alert, and the more your tissues are starting to resist that stretch. So it's almost like your tissues are being pulled on, which means that the moment you are near your end ranges, it almost feels like you want to be pulled back. And that pulling back sensation also can inhibit, or at least that is something that inhibited it for me, and it's also something I saw with clients in the past, is that it can inhibit some parts of that actual change that you want to facilitate, because you are in that end range, and rather than spend or increasing contractions for change to happen, you are more resistant towards that occurrence. So that is I think more of an empirical perspective here, but the other one is, I think, more efficient if you want to specifically target the end ranges, and that is by going into your end ranges immediately and then provide a very strong contraction there. So you don't add load, or at least not in the load over a full range. You go towards your end range immediately and you don't add that extra load in. But once you are in your end ranges, you then want to provide a very strong and potent contraction at the highest regard so that you're maximally efficient with stimulating your brain and the nervous system in order to feel more control over that range of motion. And the, I think also potent part here is that you can spend less time on the actual end range stimulation or conditioning as well, which means that you have much more time also available for recovery and for the rest of the activities you want to pursue. So this has not only decreased the amount of time I spent on end range weaponizing my joints much more, but it also had allowed me to be much stronger in these end ranges, and especially with certain positions also accumulated more range because the brain and the body simply felt had more control in these ranges, and it just went much faster than the weighted stretched approach. All right, so now it's time to zoom in those 6 positions or patterns in order to weaponize our joints. And the first one is the hinge pattern. So the hinge pattern is a pattern in which you are predominantly flexing the hips. So you're moving into hip flexion. And when you're doing that, you're creating a stretch on the entire posterior chain, or at least many areas of the posterior chain. So think of the back, or at least the areas around the spine. So your upper back, lower back, predominantly glutes, hamstrings, calves. They all get stretched. They all get moved into their end ranges. Now, what I like to do in this case, in this hinge position, I like to go for a standing pancake, so that we're also combining some areas of the groin as well, creating a stretch there, and we're moving as far as we can into the end range of motion. So what you want to do is you want to keep your lower back more or less straight and then flex forward or hinge forward towards the ground. Now you go all the way until you can't go any further from a natural cadence. So it's not like you have to voluntarily pull yourself further. It's like you involuntarily go to your end range. Then once you're there, you have established your range of motion, you go back up, and then you go down again, and that is when you immediately start to weaponize your end ranges in this position. So you want to keep the legs maximally extended, so the knees are extended or straight, and what you then have facilitated is that this entire posterior chain is in its max length positioned. Then from your position, no matter where you are, you grab your legs. And what you then want to do is you want to pull or try to pull your belly towards the ground with your arms. So it's like arms are pulling your torso down, in which you're leading with the belly. And as you do, you want to then go up by contracting the lower back, the glutes, the hamstrings, the calves. You want to maximally contract them and imagine that you're trying to pull yourself back into this standing position. So this is really maximizing, or here you're trying to maximize a forceful contraction, where you really want to make sure that that end range or that stimulus creates that necessary contraction to the brain and nervous system that you're safe. So I always tell the clients that I work with, like, the harder you contract, the quicker you're sending a signal for change to happen, which is in this case by telling the brain and nervous system, we got this. And 2, also on a tissue level, to promote changes over time, so that it feels more or less vulnerable in these positions. So as you can see I'm squeezing as hard as I can. Now what you can do after a contraction is that if your body allows you to get into a bit more of a range, in this case, so if you can flex a little bit more, hinge a bit more, then do that. So if you can lower with the belly leading more towards the ground, again going into these contractions, do it again. So this is the procedure of the standing pancake that works the hinge pattern, so predominantly flexing the hips. There are also other ranges of motion that are happening at the pelvic area, but this is predominantly the movement direction you're utilizing, and you're here strengthening the end range of your posterior chain of the tissues that are stretched there. And over time, you will feel that this position, or the more you can bring your head in between the legs, the more range you're covering, in which the brain and nervous system feels safe, and also that you can control, or that your tissues can control those ranges. So that is also the most important training parameter, is that your orientation is to bring the nose in between the legs, because that will facilitate more and more hip flexion and create more lengthening on the posterior chain. Moving to the next, which is the deep squat. Now the deep squat is, I think, one of the most fundamental movement patterns, and the deep squat is something I think is very special, because you're focusing, in this case, or we're focusing on the hips, but it has that ripple effect, as mentioned earlier, on the knees and the ankles. So when you are going in or trying to perform the deep squat, I always have the people that I work with test first how far they can go. So they go down. When they stop, you have a first reference. Then you go to the wall and you first address your ankle dorsiflexion. So the wall is very nice because you can press into it and therefore try to accumulate more strength over the range of motion that you want to go for. Now what I try to do here is I try to bring the heels as close to the wall as I can, which already has you which already lets you drive the knees more forward as you are descending to the ground. So the closer you bring the butt to the heels, with the heels closer to the wall, the more you need to drive the knees over the toes and create that ankle dorsiflexion. So once you are in that position, you then want to maximally drive the knees forward, but pressing into the wall, or pushing your back into the wall as much as you can. So you're creating these opposite forces, but those are necessary in order to facilitate change, or at least strengthen the ranges of your ankle dorsiflexion as much as you can. Now, once you have done that, and I will provide the necessary reps and sets in a second, then you go towards the internal and external direction, because that is something the hip or the deep squat facilitates, is it lets you work your internal and external rotation in this position. Now, you're going to use the wall to lean into so that you can maximally contract. Now, first, this is the external direction. What you can do here is, the closer you can bring the feet, the wider you can pull the legs apart and create that external rotation. So you're going to sit here, maximally externally rotate until you feel a stretch emerging at your groin area, so the adductors. And then once that is happening, you then going to push into your hands, or you're going to bring them or push the knees back into their neutral position, but you're going to press it out with the hands, creating that max contraction near end range of your external of the external rotation of your hips. Then for the internal direction, you want to widen your stance. The wider you are, the more internal direction of the hips you can go for, and go or stimulate the other direction. So you stand as wide as you can, then you bring the knees closer towards each other as much as you can, and then once you're in that position, you try to push the knees out while pushing it in with the hands maximally. And you do all of these contractions, both for the standing pancake as these. You accumulate 1 to 3 maximal contractions for 6 to 10 repetitions, for 1 to 3 sets, depending on the goals that you have. So this is it for the deep squat. Now the next one is the sissy and Seiza pattern, and this has more of a stimulus on the knees, the ankles, and the toes, which is a pretty big one. However, you're utilizing, or if you're utilizing more and more hip extension and extension of the torso, you're providing a higher stimulus on the knees itself. So hence why this is also influenced by how you position the joint, the hip joint. And of course, it's not as much hip extension as you could, for example, get through other exercises, but it is one where you're still going into some part of hip extension, and you have a ripple effect on the knees and the ankle joint that comes after. Now, what you want to do for the sissy and Seiza position is you want to have a door frame, or you want to have a support first, because this will allow you to get yourself into your end range, in which you're already starting by contracting the glutes and making sure that that trunk is also extended. So you're not creating a hinge or hip flexion. You're making sure that your torso is more in an extended position, which you facilitate with the glutes and the hips, by contracting the glutes and extending the hips. So you first measure your end ranges, both for the sissy and then for the sisa, which is when you have your legs on the ground, or the lower part of the legs on the ground. Then you move back up towards the starting position, and then you immediately go to that end range. So it's first establishing end range, then you go towards your end range. And once you're there, you maximally go to that end range, and then you pulsate upwards. So you give a small contraction upwards, and then you release, let yourself go towards that end range position again. Then you pulsate upwards again. So it's like end range, pulse up or contract up, move up, go back, release, go back. And the more you do this, you can see if you either are in the same range, or if you again can accumulate more strength and control in lower parts. So if you can go lower and lower, lower. Now you do this for 6 to 10 repetitions at your end range. First of the sissy position. So the sissy is when the knees are lifted from the ground. Then you move towards the sisa position, and you do the same. So you move as much backwards as you can until you feel a maximal stretch occur at your quads and tension arise at the knee joint. And then once you're there, you pulse it up. So you're trying to have as little support of your hands on the supports that you have. You pulse it up, you go back. You do this again for 6 to 10 contractions, and then you move entirely upwards without as little support as you can from the hands. And then you have accumulated then you rounded up one set of both the sissy and sisa pattern, in which you can do this one set once per week, and then every time you accumulate more and more stress, or more and more you accumulate more and more strength over the end ranges as you go week by week. So this is the sissy and sisa position. So these are the patterns for the lower body. Now let's move towards the upper body. And the first one is we're trying to work the rotation of the spine. So this is a big one for many gents that I work with. But what we're going to do here in order to create more strength in your spinal rotation, or in this transverse plane of motion, is that we're trying to work towards a cross reach. So this is where we're basically fixating the feet and as much of the hips as possible, right, and creating as much rotation at the shoulders as much as possible, so that you're immediately creating torque or rotational force at the level of your spine. So once you're in this position, you first go into a seated position. You bring your butt up, then you migrate towards one arm, and what you then want to do is you want to cross your arm over, as you see me do here, and then you're going to extend both the knees and the hips as much as you can, but you're maintaining this crossed position. So what you're here doing is you're seeing, okay, how far can I move almost into this single arm bridge, but you're trying to have as much of this shoulder rotation happening. And as you can see that my spine is already creating, or is in this rotational fashion. You do this as much as you can, and that is your starting point. Then you do it on both sides. Then you go to the wall. So the wall lets us fix both the extremities, so the arms and the feet, and then we create that torque at the level of the spine. So what we're then doing is, once we have the hand on the wall, we're just simply taking rotational steps of the feet as much as we can, and then we're trying to bring the hips on top of the feet as well. So once we're rotating out, we're then trying to rotate the hips neatly stacked on top of the feet, but you want to make sure that you keep this shoulder as much in line with the hand as well, and that will create this rotation at the level of the spine. So as you can see here, I'm trying to have those hips locked on the feet, but I want to have the shoulder more or less turned away, and that creates that rotation of the spine. Then the orientation is, once you are in this position, you drag, once you try to draw the hand in front of you, but you try to do it with the hand fixed on the wall. So you're trying to accumulate as much of this contraction, and as you already see, you're activating your external oblique in order to bring your torso more in line with the hips. And this is also how you create that strength near that end range. Every time you have that contraction, you see if you can rotate the feet and the hips a bit further and further and further. So it's like contraction in maximum torque, more rotation, maximum contraction. So this is really how we're gonna make sure that we're strengthening the rotational capacity of the spine near our end ranges. Again, 6 to 10 repetitions, and then you test, and eventually, if you are also equipped with the end range strength of the next exercise, you can go for full bridge rotations, in which you're trying to maximize this cross reach, go into a full bridge and go back to a starting position, as you can see me do here. Now this brings me to the next exercise before the bridge version, which is working your shoulder extension. So here we're moving towards the shoulders, and the shoulders are neatly tied into how the spine functions as well. And extension is also a big area where a lot of men that I work with, and I think people in general, have some limitations. So what we go for here is a German hang. A German hang is very nice because it lets you use your body weight into your end ranges. You can also perform this with your hands on a chair and move into your end ranges for, if you want to maximize shoulder extension. Now, what you want to do here is you want to utilize first the position of the hands, which is where the palms are facing the sky, and you have them, you have the rings in this position. You can also use a bar if you want to, but you have them, the palms facing the sky, and then you're trying to lower the torso until you know your end ranges. And this is what you're doing until you found a maximal stretch on the pecs and also the front part of your deltoid. And then once you have established that end range, then you're going to go back into it, and you're going to continuously try to pull your arm towards the ground and then release. So the more contraction you provide in trying to bring almost your hips upwards and then releasing, that is showing the brain and the nervous system that you control that range. And then over time you can sink your trunk and legs more and more and more, while having the arms and shoulders in a more extended position. And eventually what you can do is, once you feel that you have sort of the amount of contractile output, then you can start releasing the hands. But the goal orientation is that you want to have that strength in that end range, and then over time, if you can bring the torso more and more vertically, and the knees as well, so that you're creating more shoulder extension. And again, you can do this with a bar as well, or you can also bring your hands on a chair or a couch and then move upward or lower the torso, bringing your shoulders more in extension, and then trying to push back up and lowering more and more. So I like the rings because I've done many years with the German hang and other progressive exercise of this, but this is also something you can do at home with your couch. Now, time for the next one. So the final exercise is the opposing direction of shoulder extension, which is shoulder flexion. So in this case, you're going to test your current shoulder flexion capacity by performing a bridge, bringing the heels close to the butt and then the hands next to your face, and then try to push yourself upwards with the thoracic and the hip region towards the sky as high as you can. So the more you can create this nice arch on the posterior chain, the more shoulder flexion you possess. So that is the way you're going to test this, and you're going to build this strength in your flexed position of the shoulder with a wall. So you're going to have your hands against the wall, and then you walk away from the wall with the feet until you feel that you're in a neat position that you can bring your thoracic and shoulder region towards the ground. You also want to make sure that you have your shoulders near towards the elbow, which makes the scapula move into elevation, and that brings the shoulder into an optimal position to reach shoulder flexion. Then you're gonna press down, or you're gonna lower down until you feel a stretch occur at the regions of the back or the lats or a little bit on the deltoids. Then once you are there, you're going to imagine trying to draw or pull the wall that you're against on towards the floor. So it's the opposite direction of going into shoulder flexion, right? So you're going back almost into shoulder extension, and then every time you've done that, then you're going to see if you can sink down further and further. If not, that's also fine. It's just a matter of seeing if more range will be allowed by the brain and the nervous system in which you can gather strength into. So it's folding or bringing the thoracic and the shoulder region as close to the ground as you can. Once the areas that are being stretched are emerging, then you're going to press down with the arms towards the ground. So this comprises all of the patterns to work both on the hips, on the spine, and on the shoulders, and are positions that once you attain them or a level of them, it will have you build strength across these different joints, but also on the joints that are coming after. So as you see here, your elbows are also getting worked, your wrists are getting worked, and again with the sissy, for example, you're also working your ankles, you're working your knees, you're working your toes. So all of these positions have a primary focus, or not all, but mostly a focus on the shoulders, hips, or the spine, but also have a ripple effect on the other joints that we want to make sure to strengthen. Now, if you want to know how you're performing on all of these positions and where your dominant restrictions are, I created a free assessment which you can download in the link below. It will take you 3 to 5 minutes, and it will also be accompanied with the exercise that you saw prior in a format that you can execute on for yourself. Now, in the link below that, if you want to work with me one-on-one, if you want to see how we can implement these positions for you in a more one-to-one approach, then you can apply in the link below as well. And if not, check out the other content on the channel, and hope it helps. See you there, and check you later.